Hello, good morning everyone. My name is Aaron Mapuhat, and we are Group 4 consisting of Mapala Desiree, De La Cruz Syra, and De Chavez Irene. So today we're going to be discussing the remedial or teaching remedial for English instruction. So before we proceed to our main discussion, I would like to state the following learning objectives that we must achieve at the end of this discussion, or our goal for this particular discussion. So the first one is, at the end of this discussion, the student must know the importance of stress, volume, tone, and pace of the speaker. At the end of this discussion, the student must know how to correct pronunciation. And the last and final one is, at the end of this discussion, the student must know how to apply different advices in standing or understanding instructions. When you're learning to understand spoken English, you won't just have to understand what the speaker is trying to say. To really get to the point, often you also have to pick up, or you also have to realize about the speaker's tone, attitude, or degree of uncertainty or certainty. In other words, it's not just about what someone has to say, it's about how she feels about it. Did she say it with a confident tone, an angry tone, a defeated tone, or something else? In this particular lesson, you'll get some tips and practice for figuring all that out. And we're going to focus on three subtopics of the listening and comprehension. The first one is the tone, volume, and pace of the speaker. The second one is correcting pronunciation. And the last and the final one is understanding instructions. Without further ado, let's proceed to our first main topic. It is called the stress, tone, volume, and pace of the speaker. And now we will focus first on stress, okay? So, stress is a relative emphasis that may be given to a certain syllables in a word, or certain words in a phrase or a sentence. In English, stressed syllables are louder than non-stressed syllables. Also, they are longer and have a higher pitch. English is a stress-limited language. That means that stressed syllables appear at a roughly steady tempo, whereas no or non-stressed syllables are shorter. So here are the example on how to use stress in a word. So in a word garden, the first syllables being stressed is garden. In a word mushroom, the first syllable is also being stressed. It's called mushroom. In the thermometer, the second syllable is stressed. It's called thermometer. So now let's proceed to the second element, which is volume. So one big clue that you can listen for is volume. Volume refers to how loudly or quietly a speaker is talking. In English, volume can indicate several different things. Number one, emphasis. If a speaker thinks she's saying something important, she'll probably saying it louder, in the middle of the paragraph at a normal volume. A sentence spoken more loudly stands out. Strong emotions. If a speaker has a very strong opinion on something, her volume will probably increase. This is true. Whether the emotion is positive or negative, people shout when they're angry, but also when they're excited. Number 3, certainty. People who are sure of their opinions tend to speak more loudly. On the other hand, people who aren't confident tend to speak more quietly. So now let's proceed to the third category, which is called the tone. Tone of voice means the way a speaker naturally changes his or her voice in order to show feelings. For example, if a speaker's voice is relaxed, moves up and down a lot, and rises at the end, English speakers will think the speaker's attitude is positive. Listening for tone of voice will help you to understand the speaker's attitude. We can refer to this way that something is said as tone of speaking. This tone varies by several dimensions, which is number 1, pitch. This is show how high or low the speaking. Think about the tone of the voice can tell how each speaker feels about what they are saying. So now let's proceed to the last category of our first subtopic. It is called the pace of the speaker. As a speaker, the art of pacing can be one of the greatest tools, too fast or too slow. The ultimate goal is to speak at a conversational pace. Do not attempt to speak in a completely steady pace. Measuring out every word evenly, this could come off as monotone and boring. The combination of fast and slow medium speed makes your speech more engaging. Fast. It is the identification of the passion, urgency, excitement, and emotion. Slow. Identification of importance, sadness, confusion, the seriousness of the point of the introduction of new ideas used to help the audience to understand the grasp of the message. So here are the average word per minute per speaking scenario or for different speaking scenarios. So the first one is for presentations. It's between 100 to 150 words per minute. For comfortable paced conversational, it's between 120 to 150 words per minute. For audiobooks, it's between 150 to 160 words per minute, which is the upper range that the people comfortably hear and vocalize words. Radio hosts and podcasters between 150 to 160 words per minute. Auctioneers can speak about 250 words per minute, and commentators between 250 to 400 words per minute.
Correcting or teaching pronunciation. Below are techniques and practice materials in teaching and correcting pronunciation, which has been used traditionally and continue to be utilized in speaking class. Tip number 1. Listen and imitate. Learners listen to a model provided by the teacher and then repeat and imitate it. Usually, imitating is copying actions or words, so this technique is all about copying something that a native speaker is saying exactly. It teaches you to listen to the sounds and patterns of English and trains you to make the same sounds yourself. You are training your mouth with your ears. Tip number 2. Phonetic training, such as articulatory descriptors, articulatory diagrams, and the phonetic alphabet. The basis of practical phonetic training is a framework which is independent of any particular language and which attempts to cover the sounds of all known human language. This can then be exploited in the teaching and learning of specific foreign languages. Tip number 3. Minimal pair drills. These provide practice on problematic sounds in the target language through listening, discrimination, and spoken practice. Drills begin with word level, then move to sentence level. Minimal pair sentence drills is consisted of paired sentence such as he slipped on the floor, he slept on the floor. Again, learners would be asked to distinguish which of the sentences they heard as the teacher read them aloud. Another use of minimal pair drills was in pair work. Tip number 4. Contextualize minimal pairs. The teacher established the setting or context, then key vocabulary is presented. Students provide meaningful response to sentence stem. A minimal pair or close pair consists of two words with sounds that are very similar but have different meanings. For example, rat and lot may sound similar, especially to some non-native English speakers. Tip number 5. Visual aids. These materials are used to keep productions of focused sounds. Visual aids can be defined in two ways: as a picture or a diagram you show learners to help their understanding, or in a broader sense as anything you show learners in a classroom to do this. The class is learning vocabulary to name parts of the face, and the teacher uses photographs of people as a visual aid. Tip number 6. Developmental approximation drills. Second language speakers take after the steps that English-speaking children follow in acquiring certain sounds. Developmental approximation drills is a technique suggested by the first language acquisition studies in which second language speakers are taught to retrace the steps that many English-speaking children follow as they acquire certain sounds in their first language. Tip number 7. Practice of vowel shifts and stress shifts related by affixation. Vowel shift. Meme, long E. Mimic, short E. Sentence context. Street memes often mimic the gestures of passers-by. Stress shift. Photograph. Photography. Sentence context. I can tell from these photographs that you are very good at photography. Tip 8. Reading aloud or recitation. Passages and scripts are used for students to practice and then read aloud, focusing on stress, timing, and intonation. Tip 9. Recording of learners' production. Playback allows for giving of feedback and self-evaluation. In short, student production is the act of allowing students to practice speaking. In more traditional, dare I say, outdated classrooms of yore, the teacher stands at the front of a bunch of students and lectures them for hours.
So, let's move on to the building blocks which necessary to develop understanding instruction. First, hearing. Our ability to communicate with other people is heavily dependent on our ability to understand instruction. We usually act dependent on what we understand based on what we heard. Therefore, we tend to talk and respond to a given instruction based on what we understand on the things we heard. Working memory. The ability to temporarily retain and manipulate information involved in language comprehension, reasoning, and learning new information to update this information as change occurs. 1 to 2 years of age can follow simple step instruction. Example, give a cup to mom. Then, 2 to 3 years of age can follow 2 more commands. Example is go to your room and get your jacket. 3 to 4 years of age can follow 3-part instruction. Example is point to the cat, dog, and monkey. Fourth is attention and concentration. Sustained effort doing activities without distraction and being able to hold that effort long enough to get the task done. Attention and concentration is very essential in understanding instruction as it assists the learners in selecting and focusing on task or instruction given to them. We then use concentration skills to sustain our attention to that specific task. Using these skills allows us to filter through irrelevant stimuli to be able to focus on the most important information at that moment. What can be done to improve following instruction? First is eye contact. Get the visual attention before giving them an instruction. Getting their attention first will make the students be focused on the instruction. Second is single instruction. Only one instruction at a time. Give only one instruction at a time because students might be confused on what instruction they need to do. Also, they might feel information overload. Next is simple language. Keep language simple and direct. Using a simple language in giving instruction will make the learners easily to understand an instruction. It should be clear and precise so that the learners will not be confused on what they need to do. And the teacher should also clearly articulate the expectations of the assignments or tasks, explaining what students have to do, how they have to do, and when they have to complete it can help them understand and follow your directions. Providing a strong detailed rubric with the assignment can also make both the teachers and the students' job clearer and easier. Next, break verbal instruction into parts. Instead of go and get your lunchbox and you're hot and go outside, say get your lunchbox. When the child hasn't followed that instruction, say now get your hot. Then okay, now you can go outside. Next is repeat. Get your child to repeat the instruction to ensure that they understood what they need to do. Example, go and get your bag, then sit at the table. What do I want you to do? Giving them some redirection and some repetition can help them reassemble their thoughts and focus on their action. Next is first and then. Use this concept to help the learner know what order they need to complete the command. Example is first get your jacket, then put on your shoes. Allowing them to know the sequence of things or instruction they need to do help the learners organize their thoughts and actions. Next is to clarify. Encourage your child to ask for clarification if they forgot part of the instruction or have trouble understanding what they need to do. Encourage them to ask for the command to be repeated or clarified. Example is, can you say that again, please? Last is visual aids. Example of visual aids are pictures, gestures, body language, and facial expression. It can be used to assess the comprehension and recall the instruction.
Difference between hearing and listening. Hearing is a psychological order, it is perceiving sound, and it is a passive process. While listening, it is interpretative order, it is interpreting sound and the verbal and nonverbal actions, and it is active process. Hearing refers to the sounds that you hear, whereas listening requires more than that. It requires focus. Listening means paying attention not only to the story, but how it's told, the use of language and voice, and how the other person uses his or her body. In other words, it means that being aware of both verbal and nonverbal messages. Your ability to listen effectively depends on how the degree which you perceive and understand messages. In conclusion, in this article, you will find an explanation of listening comprehension in a practical way. After reading, you will understand the basics of this powerful method of communication skills. Listening comprehension is a part of the communication skills such as the development of reading and writing comprehension. Listening comprehension has the multiple processes of comprehension in language when it is understood, interpreted, and spoken. The communication skills is connected to cognitive learning as it works with the development of memory, attention, vocabulary, and comprehension monitoring. Listening then is the interpretation of spoken language, and this includes the recognition of discourses of sounds, the understanding of the meaning of individual words, or the understanding of the syntax of sentences that may arise in a dialogue or discourse. The importance of recognizing context in listening means that the person can relate what they hear to the real world which they live, as they can symbolically recognize concepts with language and link them together in order to understand what they hear and give it a meaningful meaning.